I
could see
forgot to
them.
turn the recording on, so we'll go back to that. All right, so the first one is Boiling Springs, Pennsylvania. This one happened actually just last year. There's only a preliminary NIOSH report that I had trouble finding. What happens is at about 1 o'clock in the morning in this rural area near Carlisle, there was a dispatch for a heavily involved structure fire. Units arrive on location. There's heavy fire showing from this 2-story residence. You can see there's a Google Earth picture of what the house looked like in advance. So you can see a little bit about what they were dealing with. With a report of one resident trapped inside. There was one person outside, a man who said he and his wife lived there. They had gotten out. He was burned. She went back in to get their dog. Okay. This is, like I said, this is the Google Earth view. This is the, this is the after the incident was over. Make sure. So what happens is basically right after the units arrive on location, there had been you could tell there was a porch here, and they try to make entry through this front door. And what happens is the porch collapses on top of the crew, and one of the firefighters gets trapped under that porch. To add to it, there were power lines down, and the power lines were down on that porch. So when they tried to move the debris from the porch, all of that was energized. So they were actually moving things and being shocked at the same time in order to try to get to the trapped firefighter. Is there anything anybody can see here that you might want to be consider in terms of the incident when you first show up that you might want to keep in the back of your mind? All right. One thing that we can notice here, this looks like a pretty typical farmhouse, but in this picture, I know it's a little small maybe for you to see, but this is a log section of the house. So this house had been added on to 3 times and was really old. So the construction, it's all wood frame construction, burns pretty fast, and lack of building codes. So what happens is there's a line of duty death where the firefighter Jerome Gives of the Mount Holly Springs Citizen Fire Company 1 died of smoke inhalation. He tried to go into, like I said, he tried to go into the porch. And what happens is his mask is dislodged. There's not a lot in that preliminary NIOSH report. What we do know is that there was also one civilian fatality. They found her after the incident was over. And the big things that came out in the preliminary ones was, number one, the power lines. And number two, just the heavy fire conditions. When they arrived, there was significant fire, we could tell from these pictures, from basically the entire house. And they made the decision to enter to look for the residents. So that's something we just need to be cognizant we show up is our space is tenable, and if the spaces are tenable, what's the best way to get to them? Is it through the front door? But unfortunately, in this case, when they made that attempt, they ended up with a line of duty death.
Zach, the first thought is to go in the front door.
Yes.
Because if that person in that house is making any effort to get out, is probably they're heading towards that front door, the most used means of egress.
Yes.
But, you know, you just think that that porch is just basically nailed or heavy screwed into that wood. And, I mean, it's, the only support it has is out front, really.
Yeah.
On the post.
And I don't know if that's necessarily something that always enters our brains, is the
That's not.
porch really being almost a separate structure that is attached to the house
Yep.
when you make entry.
I
So
mean,
it's something we need to, you know, we look, I think, a lot of times with tunnel vision at the house and maybe not the porch or some of the, like carports and stuff that we need to think
you just
about
think,
too.
just example here, when Mom and I added the porch out front, the beams are attached to the existing house, 4-inch leg bolts. And that's all it is. I mean, there's dozens of them, but that's all it's there. There's no real other support. Same way with your decks on your home as well. Almost the same thing.
There's another thing too. People are starting to block their front doors off and use the side doors.
Yep. And another factor that impacted this was the fact that everyone was out of the house and she went back in for her dog.
Yep.
So really this didn't need to happen because everybody had been able to evacuate the structure. So that's something, probably when she went back inside, it was already too late. You know,
That part of Pennsylvania, the Carlisle, Cumberland area, they are a very aggressive area as far as fire suppression. They are very, very aggressive. So,
and I will say one of the commendable things I noticed, an 11-minute time rescue with the porch collapse.
Yep.
And it's energized is pretty good.
I was thinking the same thing.
And it still ended up with the negative consequences.
Yeah, very much.
Any other questions about this incident before I go on to the next one?
Just real quick, the truck officer works for Loudon, so I knew a little bit about this, but you know, the thing that you got to remember, big fire, big water. Not every fire is an 1 3/4 line. Could they have made a difference by possibly, you know, again, we're not critiquing here, but you know, just another thought of, we got a deck gun, darker down real quick. That way it makes the area more habitable.
And chances are you might have hit the porch with the deck gun and it would come down before.
Yep.
All righty. So this is the next one I wanted to talk about. I think this is pronounced Onondaga County, New York. I wish I could get the slides to come up and I could also see can everybody see those pictures, or is it too small?
They're tough, but I'm seeing them.
Okay.
Not the old bunch.
I apologize for that. I don't know why it won't work right now. This one happened on March 7th, 2002. What happens is, does somebody have a question?
Can you zoom in at all? Just change the zoom.
Let me try. That might work. Let's make it,
Oh, Lord.
What's going on, Phil?
Not much.
that made it worse.
You, man. You're
Go
it.
this way.
What I do wrong?
Nothing.
Is that better for everybody?
Good
Yeah, that's
see
what
your face.
Yeah, you can.
It won't let me bring up my notes and the PowerPoint at the same time for some reason. It worked earlier. Like I said, this one happened on March 7th, 2002. On the left there is an aerial view of where the incident was. It's actually this house here in the middle. What happens is at 1910, there's a call into dispatch for a reported fire in a basement. In 1928, this is a rural area, 18 minutes, the assistant chief arrives and reports there's a fire in the basement and smoke coming from the first floor. The owner tells him that he was grinding metal in the basement and sparks entered up in the void space in the ceiling. Started a fire. He tried to extinguish the fire with a garden hose. Their water pump failed, and then he called 911. So right there, we already know 18-minute response time, plus all that, the fire's been burning for a very long time. It's already a
30
deep
minutes
fire.
anyway.
At 19:30, so this is 20 minutes after dispatch, the first crew enters the basement. They go in through the garage here on the right and try to go down the basement steps. They couldn't make it because there was too much fire. But what they do is they knock down all the fire they can see on the first floor. At 1951, crews are ordered to break the windows on the first floor. That crew's still in there. In 1953, another crew enters the basement. They go in through the basement entrance. And a couple minutes later, they report there's no water pressure. So they come back out, get that resolved, but they go back in through the garage to go into the basement. And that's at 1959. So we're now at about 50 minutes after dispatch. And at 2000, 3 firefighters from that crew fall through the first floor where they had gone in. One firefighter is able to self-extricate by coming back up the steps. But unfortunately, at 23:30, they recovered 2 bodies in the basement of this structure, 2 firefighters. And this is what it looked like much later in the incident. You can see fire burned up through the roof. The garage is gone, but this all started in the basement. This is after the RIT occurred, after the Mayday occurred. And this is just another picture of the house later. So this was a 2-story wood frame, single family dwelling, asphalt roof, and it had cedar clapboard siding. So that meant it burned pretty fast up through the siding. Lightweight truss, about 4,000 square feet. So it's your typical residential structure with a lot of fire showing eventually. So what happened? There is a double line of duty death. Fayetteville, New York firefighter Timothy Lynch and Manillas, New York firefighter or fire department lieutenant John Granachetti unfortunately didn't make it. There is a NIOSH report, but there's also one from the New York Department of Labor, which they're a little bit more poignant in their findings. They note that command did not maintain contact with the attack crews. So you notice when I talked about they went in the basement, they came back up, they went through the garage. The attack crews and command, he didn't know where they were at all times, and they didn't give a lot of reports on what was going on with the fire. Early in the incident, command put in service, and it wasn't clear. I guess it was an engine, but it could have been a tanker. A unit with 700 gallons of water. So they had issues with water supply later on because they didn't have that unit. It's a rural area, and they had to use water shuttle. The teams operating didn't know what the other ones were doing. Command gave orders without knowledge of the fire, which means he didn't know fire conditions. They're not relaying to him what was going on. So he was unable to give the correct orders based on what was happening. He was giving them based on incomplete information. And backup crews and rescue teams were deficient. I think there was no RIT team established. And this is basically some of the after effects. This drawing is of the basement. This is where the 2 firefighters were found directly over the workbench. So that is where the fire started. Basically, they walked through the stairs to the garage, turned left on the first floor, and fell through where the fire started, the weakest point. And here's a picture of that. Here's the workbench. Here's where they were trying to go down to the basement. You got to imagine the first floor. And this is where they fell through. So the big takeaway here, apart from those ones from the labor department, are that fire been burning for a really, really, really long time. So you need to understand that the structural supports were definitely weakened by that fire, burning for at least half an hour, probably longer before anybody went in. Does anybody have anything else they saw with this or that we talked about?
You figure if they're grinding metal in the basement, that's an unfinished basement. So that means all of your joists are exposed already. So that weakens them and adds your time, at half already.
So one thing I will say, Ziegler, the NIOSH report wasn't 100% clear on it, but it made it sound like there was a drop ceiling in the basement. And what happened was somehow, this is what I didn't really understand, was that the metal grindings went up into that space between the trusses and the ceiling. So you're right, it was attacking the unexposed area, but it was hidden for him even initially. So that's just something to add to that.
Don't grind metal in a basement.
Yeah. That's the number one point. All right.
Can you go to the drawing one time?
Yep.
So there was an outside entrance on Charlie's side there.
Yes. And what happened was this crew actually went in there. They lost water pressure. They came back out. And when they went back in, they went back up through the first floor down to the basement.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And I will say, and Richard maybe is having a flashback. This is a little bit different, but very similar to what we faced that fire a couple years ago. And we're Sigler, and then we're in the basement, and Richard and I were trying to come down the steps. So this kind of stuff can happen here.
Use the exterior entrance.
Yeah. This is the next one.
Wait a minute, Zach, can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
On that last call, initially, these firefighters that went through the first floor originally went through the basement door first, went out, and came back in the front door.
Yes.
Why?
I do not know. The report, none of the stuff I read gave any information on why.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were directed there for some reason. And what I could gather, though this, like I said, didn't say it, part of that officer not knowing what was going on and issuing orders on incomplete information, it sounded like he didn't know there was a fire in the basement. He thought it was just on the first floor, because no one was reporting to him that the fire was still burning in the basement.
And this was fully involved when they got there?
What was that, Phyllis?
It was fully involved when they got there?
So they reported fire in the basement and smoke on the first floor when he got there. But that first crew that said they knocked the fire, I think what happened was they didn't relay that they just knocked the fire on the first floor.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I mean, how long had this been burning? And I don't know.
It's a long
It
time.
seems like I don't know if I would have sent people in if it had been going for that long and the structure was, the structural integrity was questioned. That's just me. I don't know. Look.
I think you're definitely right on that. Any other questions about this incident? question about. Somebody have one? Okay. Go on to the next one then. So the next one I want to talk about, this is Abbotsville, Wisconsin. This fire happened on March the 4th, 2012 at their local theater. This is the front of the theater from Google Earth. And this is the drawing of the theater. And again, I don't know why I can't make this bigger, but it's a lot like our theater. Okay. It had, here's the entrance on side A. You go in, there's a lobby, bathrooms, concessions. And then you go into the theater itself. And the screen's at the back. There's an exit at the back. And what happens is 12:15, this is during the day, the PD drives by and sees flames coming out of the theater. This is a very rural, small department. So there wasn't a lot of information on what goes on, but this is kind of the timeline that was pieced together. So the Abbotsville Fire Department arrives sometimes after that and goes in through side A here. Their mutual aid assignment sends a second engine with them. Abbotsville has a truck and an engine that came, but the mutual aid company is sent around to side Charlie to come in here in the back through this back door. At some point, while the crews are still inside, the ladder pipe from the truck is placed in operation because there's now flames coming out of the roof. The roof collapses and there's 3 firefighters trapped inside. 2 are rescued and 1 succumbed to his injuries. So things about this building. This building is bowstring truss, which is one of the most dangerous types of construction we can deal with in terms of roof collapse. Basically what it is there are 2 load-bearing walls and then this type of assembly over top of it. And this gives you a big open area, okay? And this is all wood truss supports up here, okay? The issue is if any part of this assembly fails, this whole thing comes down. And
Our theater's the same way.
Yep. There's absolutely nothing to hold it. And he's exactly right. Our theater's the same way. We have numerous other buildings. Most theaters built 30s and 40s, cars dealerships, all of those are bowstring truss. So the theater, F&M Bank, the town office, Woodstock Garage, those are all bowstring truss construction because that was the theater and the 3 car dealerships. So just keep that in mind. These are very prone to collapse. All right, so this is the picture that from the police cruiser, the second one, right before the engine company showed up. This building is built in 1948. It's ordinary construction, masonry, brick walls. It's 6,700 square feet. It's probably very close to the same size of the #1 theater at our theater, if you exclude the addition. So very similar. There's a void space in the ceiling, a double roof. What happened was the metal roof was damaged by a tornado about 5 years before this fire, and they put an asphalt roof on top of it, okay, leaving the old roof there. So that adds to the weight that's on top of that original bowstring truss construction. There's also snow on the ground when the fire happens, okay, about 3 inches. So again, more weight on top of this roof. This second picture is a diagram of what the crews did. So as I said, Abbotsville goes in here with the initial attack line. Okay, 1 3/4 line. They apparently knocked this fire and went in the front door. The fire ended up just being here in the front of the theater. Okay, there is no fire in the rear. I should have made that clear. The second company comes in the rear and brings their hose line all the way to the front and actually meets this crew. And they're both flowing water at the same time. All right. And this is where they were when the roof collapsed. And this is the area that the roof collapses on them. All right. And the victim, the line of duty death individual, he was from the mutual aid company. So he's right here. These are just a couple other pictures. This is afterwards. This is from side alpha, and this is the roof. And you can see once part of that roof collapsed, the whole thing went down. It's not a partial collapse, it's complete. What had happened was the manager had gone in about an hour, 3 hours before, and turned on the heat and the popcorn machine, and the heat in the lobby and where the popcorn machine was. So they're not sure if the popcorn machine caught the fire or if it was electrical from the heat. But it was about 3 hours before it was reported. So, again, a deep-seated fire. And the trap firefighter is found in the lobby area, which is right up here in the very front where the fire was and where the popcorn machine was. So there was a single line of duty death. Colby Fire Lieutenant Jamson Kampmeyer, who was also a sheriff's deputy. This was a 100% volunteer company. Here's the NIOSH factors. There was no incident command. Activities were not coordinated. So you remember I talked about the opposing hose lines. There's no communication between the departments. Their radios didn't talk to each other. It said there was an ineffective safety officer. There was no RIT. They did not know it was bowstring truss construction. The fire was undetected for a long period of time because there was no fire alarm. The master stream from the truck was set up without anyone inside knowing and with people still inside. And when the roof collapsed, no one knew where the victim was or how many people were trapped inside. So there was basically no accountability. Any questions about this incident or anything anybody wants to add?
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So everybody else got out except this guy.
There were 3 people trapped. 3 firefighters.
Okay.
He was the only one that died.
Okay.
The other 2 were injured.
So they didn't start to pull back or anything at all?
No, the roof just collapsed on them.
Okay. All right.
And the factors in that roof collapse are it's weakened by the fire. It's got that second roof on it, so that's extra weight, the snow, and then all the water that comes from that master stream that's now sitting on top of that roof. So there's a lot of weight that was on that roof, plus the fire's going on. So
Did they ever consider pre-planning?
I don't know. Like I said, this was a very rural, small department, so I would assume that there was probably no pre-plan. I mean, the bowstring truss was unrecognized, so I'm guessing there was not. But just realize this exact same thing could happen at our theater. They go in and turn the popcorn machine on with no one there. And the heat and stuff to get it warmed up before they come in. So. All right, the next one. So this is Grove City, Pennsylvania. This happens February 29th, 2008. And it's kind of hard to tell from this picture, but this is actually a 2-story wood frame duplex. The other duplex is actually, it's kind of off to the side. It's not a side-by-side duplex. It's 6:06 in the morning. There's fire reported. The temperature is 6 degrees. And there's report of 1 resident trapped inside the building. 10 minutes later, the first engine and chief arrive. And he reported the building was substantially involved, and said that the exposure, which is the duplex, was charged with smoke. They deploy a hose line, but offensive operations can't proceed due to the fire. So they're unable to get the hose line inside. The second engine comes in, engine 85, and they're sent to the second floor to conduct a search for the victim. Okay. They're sent to, supposed to be the Delta side, but they accidentally go in on the Bravo side over here. So water supply then fails. The fire hydrants are frozen. They run out of water, and the fire conditions quickly worsen. And the search crew that has no hose line is on the second floor, becomes trapped. RIT team's activated, it goes in and it rescues 2 firefighters. One dies 9 days after the incident from the injuries he sustained during the fire. This is a picture of the incident not long after the RIT had concluded. Okay. Of course, this is much later. There's a lot more fire showing. This is a drawing of the house, first floor and second floor. The important things to note here, this is the first floor drawing, side A. This is where the civilian that died in the fire that was trapped in there was found, right inside the front door. This is the second floor drawing, and this is where the firefighter was trapped, okay, and where they died. It didn't say this in the report, but what it sounded to me like what they initiated BEIS, and they went in through the bedroom window because this is the bedroom, okay, and that's where they were found, was right outside of the bedroom in the hallway. This is a 2-story wood frame duplex built in the 1930s. It's 1,000 square feet. It's balloon frame construction, which means there's no fire stops between the first and second floor. So that all that fire that's burning in the first floor is coming up to the second floor without any obstructions while they're in there doing their search. There is a single line of duty death. Brad Holmes of the Pine Township Fire Company. He's 21. He was a department president. The fire's ruled accidental. It was caused by a hairdryer running on the first floor and left on the couch. Again, the resident attempted to extinguish the fire before calling 911. The fire spread rapidly through wood paneling due to balloon frame construction and a loss of water. The NIOSH recommendations was be prepared to use alternative water due to the fact that the hydrants were frozen. Ensure the firefighters are trained in a defensive search, which means searching while there's not a hose line being deployed inside, was what they referenced. Ensure your crews have a tick. Ensure that ventilation is properly coordinated. Ensure that Mayday protocols exist and are followed. Again, ensuring that the IC receives and shares information. And ensure that progress reports are relayed to the incident commander. There's some themes that trace back to that very first one that we talked about, that we can see here again. So any questions about this incident? No one has anything? All right. Okay. So this next one, this is in Lake Buena Vista, Florida. All right, and you can tell this one's a little bit older. This is February 24th, 1989. This fire goes out at 1610. This is an all-career department. First engine responds with 3 people on it. They show up, and this is actually them when they're showing up, right here. They report heavy smoke and fire from a dormer over a front roof. And this is only pictures from the side. We're going to have some pictures of the front here in a minute. But basically what this is, on the end, there's a gift shop. And this is a strip mall. There's 2 other commercial properties to the right. So they're reporting that there's fire and smoke coming out here. Okay. They stretch a line inside, and they couldn't find any fire on the interior. So they come back out, and this is what they do. They started transitional attack, before it was transitional attack, to knock down the fire on the exterior. They do that, and they re-enter the building to start exposing the fire that's in the attic, start pulling ceilings. Then what happens while they're in there, smoke explosion occurs, and this dormer fails and falls through the ceiling onto them on the first floor. There's 3 of them in there. They're trapped. One of them escapes. You can see there's a door right here. Out this door, which had been illegally locked, he's able to break it. They try to go back in to get the other 2, and the rest of the roof fails. So they have to leave them. This is, like I said, this is a strip mall. There's 3 properties in here. It's type 3 ordinary construction, concrete block walls, 12-foot high ceilings, 7,100 square feet. So pretty big place. The space between the ceiling and the roof peak is 14 feet. So the area where the void for the trusses is 14 feet high. It's pre-engineered lightweight wood frame. And what it is there's a restaurant here, and this is the gift shop. And there was a firewall between the 2, but that firewall is breached during construction. So the pipes, electrical, everything runs through that. So there's plenty of holes, especially in that void space where the trusses are up on top for that fire to move through. And this diagram shows the fire spread. The fire actually starts here and goes through that void space into that gift shop, right through here. And this is where they go in, and this is where they're trapped. These are just 2 other pictures from later on. You can see better what it looks like. And this is after the roof collapsed on this part of the building. So again, unfortunately, there is a dual line of duty death here from Orange County Fire Department. There is no NIOSH report, but Orange County does release a report that they initiated. What they find is that the SCBAs of the 2 firefighters who died were dislodged by the roof collapse, And what they're killed through a combination of blunt force trauma and smoke inhalation because their face pieces were knocked off. Some findings are the fire can burn undetected for a long period in truss lofts. That void space of fire can be up there without being seen for a very, very, very long time. Compartmentation between buildings is violated by construction often. Wearing the hoods is essential. They found that the hoods did not fail in this instance. They did test all the gear, and the weakest point, at least in 1989, was the shoulder straps. The shoulder straps on both the line of duty desk and the firefighter who was rescued were melted. And that contributed to the SCBAs being dislodged by the collapse. Any questions about this fire? So where are some of the places we might run into something that looks like this? Everybody asleep?
Strip
What about
malls
up
we
by
have.
Walmart?
What was that?
Up by Walmart?
By Walmart. Anywhere else? You can
New
think
First
of?
Bank,
Yeah.
First National Bank,
This does look very
Farm
similar
Credit.
to a new place.
all of them.
And I can bet that probably all of those that had a firewall between them, there's a breach in there somewhere.
Yeah.
All righty. So the next one. And I've got a bunch of these. I'm not planning on going through all of them because I know we don't want to be here all night, but some of these are really different. This one is in Cottle, and I'm assuming that's how you say that, West Virginia. You can tell this is a mobile home fire. It happens February 18th, 2009. This is, again, a rural area, very small volunteer department. About 10 o'clock, there's a report of a fire in a mobile home. When the firefighters show up, there's 3 of them, and they find a camper over here that's fully involved, and there's flames impinging on the mobile home. No one's inside. So they knock down the fire in the camper, and they enter the mobile home with an 1.5-inch hose line. About 5 minutes later, between 5 and 10 minutes later, the engineer, the driver, sounds his air horn for evacuation because they're starting to run out of water. They're still the only ones there, except for the incident commander. He sounds the air horn and there's no response from anybody inside the building. They try using the radio and they can't get anybody on the radio. They try banging on the walls. They try yelling through the walls and nobody answers them. Eventually they find that the hose line's been burned through. And then much later, they find the 2 firefighters inside the front door, which this is actually the front door, okay, that they're talking about. And their face pieces are in a different location. Okay. So this is a drawing of what happened. This is a single-story mobile home built sometime between 1970 and 1980. It's 980 square feet. It's not a big place. We have plenty of these, okay? Wood frame construction, aluminum exterior, and the fire starts in a camper that's 18 by 8 over here on the side. So this is the camper. This is the mobile home. This is where the fire starts. This is them coming up. They get a knock on the fire. You can see the fires coming into the mobile home. All right. So what happens is they then go in the front door, which is here, and the wind pushes the fire that builds back up in the camper back through where it impinged on the structure into the mobile home. And eventually they're overpowered by smoke up here in this area. This is where both the victims are found, in this living room. They do end up with a dual line of duty death. And some of the recommendations are: ensure the firefighters utilize SCBAs at all time. Okay. Both of them, when they went back in after knocking the fire in the camper down, did not have their face pieces on. Okay. They were not breathing air. And probably what happened when the wind started blowing and pushed that fire back in, they didn't have enough time to put their air packs on. Ensure that the SCBAs have integrated pass alarms. There was no pass that went off because the firefighters were down. It wasn't until the engineer ran out of water that they even knew anything was wrong. Ensure each firefighter has a means of communication. There weren't any radios inside. Ensure the IC does not become involved with operations. It didn't make this clear in the report, but what it made it sound like was that one of the people involved who went interior and ended up dying was also the incident commander. Ensure accountability. Make sure there's a safety officer. Ensure RIT was available. There was no RIT. Coordinate hose line operations and make sure PPE is worn. Any questions about this fire? I mean, this could happen at Wood Park Lane pretty quickly, or one of those places way out in the county. All right. So this fire is in York, Pennsylvania. What happens is March 21st, 2018, 1616, there's a report of a fire with possible entrapment in this building. Deputy chief arrives and finds this old factory that's under renovations to be an apartment. So no fire alarm, sprinkler's been deactivated because it's under renovation. Whoop. They go offensive on the interior with an inch three-quarter line. Soon after, one of those firefighters gets lost, and another firefighter injures himself trying to find that firefighter. Okay. They both come out, and command takes operations defensive. Okay. There's rapid fire spread. 2 hours into this, the building collapses. Everybody's outside the collapse zone. They're thinking, we were lucky on that one. The fire burns overnight. Big fire, lots of help. They get it knocked down. Most people go home. The next day, the fire department is there with the truck. The crew and the truck, the assistant chief, and the building official go up in the bucket of the tower to take a look. They see some fire burning in there. There's an engineer from the people that own this place there. They work with him. They work with the building official, and they say, everything looks okay. And they send a crew with one hand line off this truck onto the third floor to hit hot spots. The chief is in the bucket observing things, and that crew's working inside. And on that day, so this is 15 hours the next day, almost 24 hours after after the fire started, the third and fourth floor collapse. or the firefighters on the third floor, and they fall through the floor when it collapses. 2 firefighters die and 2 are seriously injured. They'd been the truck crew and the shift commander. It takes 29 minutes to get them out. And again, this happens the next day after the fire had mainly burned itself out. These are pictures. So these pictures are when they first arrived and later when they're doing defensive operations. These pictures are from the next day. This is what conditions look like when that truck starts to go to operation to check things out. Okay. This is a large, heavy timber construction, old factory, 53,000 square feet. And it was completely under renovation. So the fire had been burning for a long time before it was discovered. So they do end up with dual line of duty death. Firefighter Ivan Flanchka and Zachary Anthony. Identified factors: inactive sprinkler system had been turned off. The fire burned for a long time. It had to burning at least 24 hours before the collapse started. There had been a previous collapse. Okay. And definitely inadequate risk versus gain analysis. What were they trying to gain by putting a single line in there to knock down this fire in this collapsed building that they had been doing defensive operations on for a day? Okay. Recommendations: firefighters trained to understand collapse hazards. And risk assessment has to be continuous. It can't stop just because you get tired or bored or whatever is going on. And I couldn't determine what the outcome of this was, but there was actually a lawsuit from these families against the fire department, the city, because the building official was there, and the engineer from the people that owned this place. So not only did they have to deal with this line of duty death, but this lawsuit that affected everybody. So any questions about this fire? All right.
Oh, Zach, close it up.
What?
Get her done.
We're getting there. I'm not going to do all these, but we'll do a couple more. We've only been here,
An hour.
try to keep an hour. So this fire, this is in Bonneville, North Carolina. Okay. Which is just outside of, I think it's Charlotte. What happens April 30th, 2016? The police department at just after 9 o'clock is sent for a security alarm at a golf store. And they find smoke in the building. 3 minutes later, after the police are sent, the fire department sent. This is a combination department, but was primarily volunteer then. The chief shows up and there's nothing evident. The engine shows up and they go in the front door, crew of 4 with an 1 3/4 line. They go right through here. The crews knock down the fire. And one of the firefighters then, when they're doing overhaul, gets low on air. Okay. And that was the nozzle firefighter. The firefighter who suffers the line of duty death is then given the nozzle and the other firefighter exits. So now there's 3 people inside. The firefighter who suffers the line of duty death, then he gets low on air and he goes out by himself. So now there's 2 firefighters inside. That firefighter becomes disoriented in the building. He goes back to the nozzle where his lieutenant and captain are, and they calm him down and then he goes back out. Okay. The one lieutenant decides to leave the captain there and go back to try to help this firefighter who had been disoriented. The lieutenant trying to go out, he's low on air. He finds the firefighter again, struggling in these display racks. Okay. He gets him out of the display racks, and then the firefighter just vanishes. And the lieutenant can't go look for him because he's low on air. At 21:35, so 19 minutes after they started, there's a mayday issued. And 2 minutes later, they find the lost firefighter. He's removed from the fire 6 minutes later, transported to the hospital. But unfortunately, about 40 minutes after they find him, he's pronounced dead at the hospital. This fire happens inside of a 70,000 square foot strip mall that was built in 1978. It originated in a golf store, which is outlined here. It's about 7,000 square feet. The front, plate glass windows with a metal security gate. The rest of it's block construction with a storage room on the rear. Just a typical big box place. The metal roof, no sprinkler, no fire alarm. All right. So very similar to what some of the places we deal with. This is inside. These are the display racks that the firefighter became disoriented in. He got tangled up on in all this stuff. Okay. This is the metal gate that they had to go through to get in. This is just some of the pictures of what the roof looked like. This is asphalt with gravel on top of the metal decking. And this is actually a picture from the rear after the fire where the asphalt out of the roof melted down. So you can tell how hot it was inside that building. This firefighter, Richard Sheltra, 20, he's the line of duty death. The fire's caused by a lightning strike. Okay. And some of the contributing factors are crew integrity. You know, he left them alone. They actually had 3 people who left alone. He was an inexperienced firefighter. Ineffective communications. They had no way of communicating with him while he was on his way out. Failure to call a mayday in a timely manner. He came back to the crew disoriented and said he couldn't find his way out. That probably would have been a good time to call a mayday. There was zero visibility due to the smoke. Mobility was restricted due to all those golf stuff. Again, conditions not being reported to the incident commander. And there were no dispatch benchmarks. So there was no updates given on what conditions were like so that they could be monitored. So any questions about this fire? All right, I think I may only have one more. So we'll talk about this one and then we'll stop. So this one is in New York, and I'm not going to even attempt to try to pronounce that. This is just a single story residential structure. This is December 19th, 2015. The fire goes out at 1858 for a chimney fire. Okay. 2 engine companies are sent. Now, because this is close to Christmas, the one company was at the town holiday festival with an engine and a rescue unit. Now, this rescue unit had no air packs on it. Okay, so that's going to be important. So they're sent, and at 1910, this rescue unit arrives first, reported a working fire. The chief of the first due company gets there, takes command. And there's 3 people on this rescue. And they're the second due company. All right. A minute after this rescue arrives, the first due engine company arrives with 2 people. They pair up with the rescue crew and go inside to fight the fire with an 1 3/4 line. The lieutenant on that engine has to get out of the unit and don his PPE before he goes inside. So there is a delay. The hose line is not put in operation until 7 minutes after that engine arrives. So there's a crew of 4 inside. They work for about 14 minutes. They knock the fire down, overhaul starts, they take their face pieces off. A second crew from the next arriving engine comes in. The original crew goes out, gets their bottles replaced, cylinders replaced, and that crew then goes into the basement to check for extension. They don't put their face pieces back on. They go in versus this walk-in door, find fire, and request a hose line. While they're doing this, a positive pressure fan is set up on the first floor to try to push the smoke out of the first floor. All right. That basement crew deploys a 2-inch hand line into the basement. 3 of them go in. The one deputy chief sees 3 of them go in. No one is really clear on whether they all have their face pieces on or not when they go in with this hose line with smoke and fire. Not even a minute later, the one lieutenant on this hose line is no longer in contact with anyone. They were talking to him and then he just wasn't there. So the crew, the assistant chief who's in charge of this crew, goes outside and tries to find him because he assumes he just didn't come in with him. And finally, in 1938, Mayday's issued for a firefighter missing in the basement. Their RIT teams deployed. They enter with the crew that this guy was a part of and search the basement. They knock the fire down and eventually find this lieutenant conscious, but way in the back of the basement at the opposite corner of where they went in. While they're pulling him out, he goes unresponsive. They cannot confirm that he had his face piece on when they found him or if he didn't. So it's either possible he didn't have it on or the face piece came on while they were pulling him out. At 1947, so 9 minutes after it's issued, the Mayday's canceled because they found him. 10 minutes later, he's en route to the hospital, and half an hour later, he dies. So he went from being confused about where he was to dead in about an hour from smoke inhalation. This is what the house looked like later. This is the rear, and this is where it started. It was a chimney fire that extended. It's a 1-story residential, about 1,000 square feet, built in 1976. Wood frame construction, full basement, walkout. It was partially finished. There was a wall down the middle, and he got on the other side of the wall from where they initially went in and where the fire was. That's why they had trouble finding him. No smoke detectors, long, narrow dirt road, gravel, driveway, rural water supply. Access is an issue. This is a drawing of what the place looks like. This is the first floor. Fire's coming out the chimney. That's pretty easy. This is what the basement looks like. Here's where they went in. Here's that wall. Fire's over here. They were able to knock that down, but he's lost here on the other side. Unfortunately, they did have this single line of duty death. Lieutenant Jack Rose, he was 19. They found a couple things regarding him. He had been fit tested for a large size mask, and he's wearing a medium mask, not from his company. It was actually a different brand of SCBA completely, inside the fire. And he has burn injuries to his face where the face piece came off. No pass activation. Even when he got lost, he didn't activate his pass. And the 2 fire departments involved received 14 violations from the New York Department of Labor. Some of the things, the issues they found: crew integrity. He disappears and they were unable to track him. Improper SCBA use. He's inexperienced. They went to a fire with a unit with no SCBA on it. They took one off from another company that wasn't even the same type. And a lack of training on fire dynamics, so how the fire would have worked. Any questions about that one or anything you wanted to share? All right, I'm going to take, this is the last one. So I'm going to just take 2 minutes to go through this one. So this is in Chesapeake, Virginia. This happened on March 18th, 1996. 11:30 in the morning. They get a call for a fire from Advanced Auto Parts. What had happened was the power company had come to turn off the power for a restaurant that was beside this place. The guy put the boom up to go do that. The guy from the bar came out with a receipt that showed he paid the bill. They put the boom back down, the bucket back down, but left the boom up. So the power company truck tried to drive away, hit the power line. The meter starts smoking on the Advanced Auto place because that's the power line they hit. The power company then goes and pulls the meter, cuts off the power, and then the guy from Advanced comes in and says, "We've got a fire inside that we're trying to put out with a fire extinguisher." They do all this, and then finally they call 911. 2 engines, a ladder, and a chief are sent for a fuse box sparking. There's 30-mile-an-hour winds that day. The first company shows up at 11:35 with nothing evident. They go into the store. They can't find anything. Eventually, they see light smoke coming from the panel box. They send the other companies, including their engine driver, around to the rear. The engine driver is coming around to the rear and sees smoke coming from out of the roof. He tells his crew that. They say, "We know about that." And then they report that 1 engine and 1 truck could handle the call. They put everybody else in service. This single engine crew deploys 2 hose lines. They take one inside and the other guy knocks the fire on the outside and then goes in to help the guy on the interior. 5 minutes into the incident, the battalion chief shows up, and now this engine requests a second alarm. But there's a lot of radio traffic going on with the driver, the interior crew, the battalion chief, and not a lot of that's getting through. 2 minutes later, there's a request for pike poles. Okay. And the engine driver on the rear now notes he needs a supply line. Okay. But the other engine is delayed. He's running out of water because, remember, they went around to the rear, said nothing was going on, and he didn't lay out a supply line. 7 minutes later, this engine crew radios that they're trapped inside the store, but nobody can hear them because of this radio traffic problem. Eventually, they figure that out, but there's no water. So they make the decision to go defensive because they're unable to get inside due to the fact they have no water to help while they're trying to set up these operations. At 11:55, this engine company reports that there's 2 individuals inside, but the lines are burned through and there's no water at all. They then do make an attempt. This is about the time the battalion chief finally figures out that there really are 2 people trapped inside. They try to make an attempt but the building's now fully involved. There's been no water on the fire. Eventually, a long time into it, they're finally able to set up a water supply when the engine from Virginia Beach shows up and hooks to the Virginia Beach system, which is actually right behind this strip mall. And then they knocked the fire down using master streams. These are two pictures after the fire starts to really escalate. This is one you can see the master streams operating here now, and then after the fire's over. So this advanced store had been built onto a strip mall. They were all lightweight construction. There was a firewall separating it from the older section, so it really didn't burn into the rest of the strip mall very much. But there were no interior load-bearing walls. So what happens is it wasn't really bowstring truss, but it was lightweight construction. And when the lightweight construction started to fail, there wasn't anything to catch it. There was a 2 to 3 foot void space between the ceiling and the roof. So when this electrical fire started, they went inside. They couldn't see anything because the fire was burning in the void space. That's why it took them so long to find it. In this void space, the ceiling was drywall. So that adds to the fact they couldn't see anything. There was also a 3,000-pound air handling unit on this roof. They're not really sure that the roof was rated to hold that. And in fact, the roof had collapsed while this building was being built and had to be rebuilt. So that you can tell there's a lot of weight issues. They did have a double line of duty death, firefighter John Hudgens and Frank Young. Contributing factors, insufficient staffing. They were trying to fight a fire with only 3 people in this large commercial structure. Difficult size up. They couldn't find anything on the front or inside. They never used a pre-plan. There was a delayed response because they tried to put people in service. Water supply, of course, was a big issue. They couldn't get the fire under control. They couldn't get water on the fire. Command was really delayed because the 1st Due Battalion Chief was busy. So the 2nd Due Battalion Chief had to come. So it took a long time for a chief officer to arrive. There was risk management failure, big time on this one. No accountability. They didn't know who was where. The RIT team was just not available in time when this incident occurred. It occurred early enough. We face that because we're waiting, just like they were, for enough people to show up to do the RIT. Lightweight construction, and then radio traffic. So many people were talking on the radio that it was really difficult for the battalion chief to determine, was someone actually trapped? Was there a roof collapse? What was really going on? And, we've all kind of dealt with that before. That's the last one I have. Does anybody have any questions about this one or any others that they wanted to ask?
No, pretty good class, Zach.
All right. I mean, I know it's a lot of pictures, but that's kind of what we're at right now. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Hey, Zig.
Off share. Anybody got anything else?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Did you get an email from the county about the drop in the level of health? They just dropped it to a level 1.
We discussed it, chiefs and captains. They said they were gonna make the determination this week, so I guess so.
They just said level 1 at the radio, the evening announcement.
What's the level 1?